Welcome to the Working Genius podcast, where we discuss anything and everything related to the 6 types of working genius and how it impacts your work and your life. I'm Pat Lencioni, your host, joined by everybody, Bo, Tracy, Cody, who are all doing fantastic. Bo is hilarious today. He's on fire, we've decided. Karen's sitting next to me. She almost cut off her finger over the weekend.
Hilarious is an interesting choice of words, but yeah, keep going.
Karen almost cut off her finger this weekend. She's sitting here with it wrapped. And Matt is behind the glass producing. So we're going to talk about what today, Cody?
Team-based staffing.
That's right. Using Working Genius to do staffing, which we think is critical, but looking at it not just, trying to understand what the job requires, but looking at how it fits into a team. And so often we say, well, what's the nature of the job? Okay, let's go find somebody that's perfect at that. But there's more to it. It's like, well, how are they going to slide into the team and where are the overlaps? It's really more of a puzzle piece that we're trying to find rather than just a straight on square that matches that job. So we want to talk about why that can be a challenge and why that can be a powerful thing when we think of hiring as finding team members, not just widgets.
Pat, as you were describing that, first of all, now I feel pressure to be funny, so I'm probably going to just absolutely drop the ball. I thought about how you contrast working groups and teams, and I thought maybe that would be an interesting way to tee this up, because I wonder if it's different based on the type of group that you're hiring for. So could you tee that up for us?
Yeah, working group, I didn't come up with that. What was his name, Karen? He was a partner at McKinsey, and he wrote a book called, I can't remember his name. I want to give him credit. Maybe we'll figure that out and say we'll put it in the show notes. But he wrote a book about teams years ago. And so a working group is a golf team, right? And that's where everybody goes out and they golf and you add up their scores at the end, and they don't really interact with each other, and it's not a real team is a basketball team where they're playing off one another, and somebody has to change the way they do things. And I love this example because if I'm drafting a team to be in the Ryder Cup, which is the international team of golf, internationally, I'm just looking for the 10 best golfers or whatever they are. But if I'm looking to make a basketball team, I'm looking like, well, I know this guy needs to be a point guard, but we have a lot of shooting. I really want this person to be really good at passing and defense. And so otherwise, you'd look and you go, what does a point guard do? And you go, well, they have to be a good shooter. Well, on this team, they don't necessarily have to be. So when we're hiring people into our organizations, rather than saying, hey, we need somebody who's great at running customer service, I really want to look at, what are their peers already good at, and what kind of hole or gap are we needing to fill?
Yeah, if we see people as just sole contributors, then it doesn't matter as much what the gaps on a team might be, because you're just looking for what are the geniuses that are needed most in this role. What's the type of work that they will be doing? But If somebody is part of a team, if they have one score that they're working towards, if they are working together towards a common objective, then it really matters for us to look at our team map and address what gaps do we have on our team, and could this next hire help address some of those gaps so that we're not getting stuck, or that we're not skipping important steps in the process of work.
And it's crazy, though, how we will put together a job description for a job and then try to fill it. And by the way, we're developing a tool using AI that's going to allow people to take a job description and see what the ideal or most likely working genius profiles would be to fit that. But then you have to take that and say, but what do I already have, and who are they going to be working with? And by the way, it's John Katzenbach, The Wisdom of Teams, was the guy who wrote that book. And so anyway, that's what we need to do, is we need to realize that, and we had told a great story years ago of a woman who was the head of sales for a company, and she was an ET. And she didn't know how to invent a new sales strategy because that wasn't her thing, and she almost got fired until they realized, oh, she doesn't do that. Well, maybe when they hire their next marketing person, they can go, let's hire somebody who's really good at invention and discernment, because they can help us come up with a good go-to-market strategy. He'll fit nicely with her, and the two of them will complete this puzzle, as opposed to just a generic head of marketing and then leaving ourselves open with the head of sales.
Yeah, I was even thinking, as you guys are teasing this out, that like even when we thought about a hire 3 years ago, when we were thinking about Bo as a candidate, we thought about, hey, Bo, we knew he had invention and galvanizing, and we looked at the context of our team, and we noticed that Pat is the only inventor, in our company before that. So we were like, oh, it'd be really great if Bo had invention. And then we also thought, hey, one of our other more scarce team dynamic, and as it relates to working genius, is galvanizing. How great would that be to have another galvanizer out here? And then the third criteria was like, wouldn't it be great if he were 1 degree less funny than me? And then he hit all of those criteria. And so it made pressure's on, Bo. I just wanted to pressure you a little bit.
Yeah, I got a text from a friend last week, actually. They sent me their team map, and slightly different than the situation you just described, Cody. They have quite a bit of wonder, quite a bit of invention, tons of discernment, and no galvanizing. And imagine that, if you're familiar with Working Genius, that the nature of that team is lots of good ideas. First of all, lots of paying attention to what's going on in the world, lots of ideas, lots of discernment to refine that, and then nobody to keep those ideas moving. And so I was having a conversation with this friend of, you have got to either borrow some galvanizing, you're going to have to really lean into somebody's competency for galvanizing, but hopefully the next hire can be somebody that will love to take those really, really well-discerned ideas and keep them moving throughout the organization.
I think that's so interesting, Bo, because regardless, I don't even know what job they're trying to hire. But whatever that job is, I would like for that person to have some galvanizing. And that doesn't have anything to do with, are they in charge of marketing? Are they in charge of operations? Are they in charge of customer service? Right now, I'm interested in them fitting well on that team. Even if the typical head of whatever department they need to fill doesn't necessarily have to have that, on that team, that person would be really valuable if they did have it. Tracy, you were going to say something.
So let me ask you guys this. How do you weight that puzzle piece? Like what weight, is it a corner piece? Is it an edge piece? Like what are the other factors? What are the other puzzle pieces that go into the hire?
What's funny about this is we just did a podcast where a few weeks ago where Bo talked about how he hates puzzles. We all agreed that they're a little bit overrated. So evidently they're really good for analogies. I would say this, Tracy, if you're really missing something, then yeah, it's like an edge piece. Mm-hmm. If you're really well balanced, you can afford to hire something down the middle and go, yeah, this is probably the kind of piece that'll work well based on that job. But if you're not looking at what's missing and where you're oversubscribed and where you're undersubscribed, then you're going to hire a generically good fit, but is not going to necessarily complete the puzzle.
I'm just going to ask a more extreme version of that question, Pat, which is like, okay, you have a candidate that is experience fit, from a technological, like on the resume fit. And then you have a candidate who doesn't have the resume qualifications, but is the exact right working genius fit. I kind of know what your answer might be, but I'm curious. Like, if you could only choose one of those two things, what would you put your bet on?
Well, the first thing, of course, I'd have to say is if whoever's the better values fit. Now, if they're equally good fits for values, because that's the most important thing, then I would say it's going to depend. And because there's so many there's no way to say, I would lean this way or that way. But all I do know is this: the team working cohesively is probably more important than an individual performing. And so I'd rather see them be a good fit for that. Because if I do bring in an all-star performer, but they're also good at the same things everybody else is good in, then I have more people wanting to do the same kind of work and somebody not filling in the gap. So actually now I've talked myself into saying, all other things being equal, I would err on the side of team fit over just skills.
I love your answer to a hypothetical question is it depends. That was not the point of that.
I think that this is so helpful as you're hiring people and staffing projects, but let's talk about hiring people. Without Working Genius, we're so prone to liking people who are like us. And so what could happen is you're in an interview, if you don't understand your own geniuses and the geniuses of other people, you could say, oh, if you're a really, really responsive team, a disruptive person might come in and kind of be annoying to you because you're used to working with and liking other more responsive type people. But when you look at your team map and understand the 6 types of work, you could see, oh, I actually need somebody to be disruptive and keep things moving. And so I think this helps us do better interviews and be able to be better aware of, okay, they might not be the person that I would be naturally towards being drawn to, but it's what this team needs because we have one scoreboard, one mission, one goal that we're all pursuing together.
Bo, you're actually a great example of this because you've brought so much to our company, and you're an IG, and we highly index on discernment. And bringing you in you've filled in so many gaps for us, and because of the humility of going, okay, I get discernment, but it's not a genius of mine. You allow us to help in those areas, but we are fully benefiting from your invention and your galvanizing. And had we just said, we would probably, if we were just hiring people that fit easily in terms of we might over-index on hiring more people with discernment. And there's a bias, just like some organizations that are really high performance in terms of getting stuff done will keep hiring people that have tenacity. And that person that doesn't have tenacity, but it has other things can be so valuable. So there is a real bias built in. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because you are the outlier that is filling gaps for us, even if you're not particularly funny.
I was going to say, what you're saying without saying it is, even though we didn't really like you or find you likable, we sure needed you. So we're glad you're here.
No. So I think that's a great point.
I think that the inverse also works. This is not a conversation necessarily about interviewing for a job, but it sure helps to be able to know going in what your geniuses are and what your frustrations are and the team members that you will need around you. So if you're interviewing for a job and tenacity is really low for you or discernment is really low for you, wouldn't it be great to know that you're joining a team that has some of those puzzle pieces already in place, where then you're not going to be defined by your limits, but be able to really lean in and use your geniuses?
Yeah, if you were interviewing for a job and you didn't have to get a job and you were very secure in yourself, you'd probably want to go in and go, I just want to make sure, one, that I'm a values fit, obviously, and second, that you really need the skills I have. Because if you don't, if I'm going to be just another one, and the fifth person with the same kind of things, I am probably only going to get to exercise my genius very infrequently. And there's probably something really wise about doing that. I don't think anybody does that, but I think that would be a smart thing to do. It's like, are you sure you need me? Are you sure? I know you need a head of marketing, but the kind of person I am sounds like it's everybody else. Am I really going to solve something for you, or am I going to be just another person angling for more airtime in my working geniuses? So I think that's pretty interesting.
It's also interesting to think that, like, we're talking about staffing for teams, Pat, and there's a bunch of people listening to this thinking like, oh, well, we're a small team, or we don't have enough. Like, what is the right level of representation in these areas? And there's no magic formula. We don't look at team maps and say you need 2 wonders and you need 2 inventors and 2 discerners. But it's almost easier to do, back your way into forensic analysis of like, man, we keep getting stuck at discernment, and even though we feel like we've created some mechanisms there, we borrow some of that, like, we just know that our team would perform at a higher level if we had a better representation of discernment there. And so there's no like quantity that we are seeking after. It's more of a qualitative thing of like, hey, do you notice that your team doesn't spend enough time in wonder? You'd so much benefit from having somebody that has that genius that you get to tap into. So I think it is worth doing a little self-audit and being honest about, hey, what are some past projects or ideas or initiatives where did we get stuck, and how much would we have benefited from somebody with this genius? And then as you go into finding that person, you know what you're looking for, and then you're giving them the gift of being able to represent themselves and their genius in a way that's super helpful for the team. So I think it's important not to just think, oh, hey, we got to get everybody in here, and here's the number amount that we need in each of these geniuses. But even just the context of viewing your team this way is going to help you find the right fit.
Yeah, I was just thinking about this. The question we have to ask ourselves is, are we hiring a functional person or a team member? And the answer has to be both. It has to be both. And there's a balance there. And depending on the situation, it's going to depend. It really is. But remember, you're always hiring. If you're a team-based organization, or if you're hiring somebody for a team, if it's a working group, go find the best golfer, go find the best marketer, go find the best salesperson. But if it's a team, ask yourself, is this going to be the best team member we could find?
I just want to make one comment about how potential danger that we could get into if we don't do this, which is, let's say you have a bunch of galvanizing on a team. What a great team to be on, wouldn't it, Cody? And you hire another galvanizer thinking, we like galvanizers. We need more people galvanizing. There is actually a limit to how much galvanizing is needed for a small team. And so you might be hiring that person thinking, oh, I love doing this galvanizing. They love galvanizing. They might actually be frustrated because there isn't as much of their genius that is needed. That same thing could be also said for enablement or discernment or any of the geniuses. And so when we aren't aware of the gaps that we have, or maybe we aren't aware of where our team already has lots and lots of genius, and we bring somebody on, we run the risk of frustrating them because they won't be able to fully deploy their genius in our organization.
Absolutely. It's like the team that gets, we have 5 leading scorers. It's like, guess what? None of them are going to get to score as much as they want to. How about a guy who doesn't care about scoring, wants to do rebounding and play defense? All right. Hey, we're going to do a new thing at the end of this podcast. We're going to read a story. We get great stories from people and Working Genius. That's our favorite thing. We get them all the time. And Whitney's put together some stories for us. We're going to read one of them. So I love this. I'm going to read this. A newly appointed CEO had always wished that her old boss, the former CEO, would ask for her ideas. She always wished he had asked more for her new ideas. In her new role, she was going to ask everyone for their ideas, and it was wearing them out. So she took Working Genius, and she discovered that she did have the genius of invention, and everyone else on the team had invention as a frustration. She said, and I love this, she said, I'm like my cat bringing me a dead mouse. It's so proud of what it brought me, and I'm like, this is gross. So she was like going to people, I want you to invent. And they were like, I don't want to invent. This isn't even fun for me. So she had great intentions to invite them to do what she wanted to do, but it was exhausting them because it wasn't their genius. Now she's able to ask them questions and tap into their geniuses, not the ones she has. And it gives them what they crave, and she gets what she craves. What a great thing. Her intentions were really good. And I love the idea of like, the cat is like, look I brought you a mouse. I'm letting you invent. And they're like, ooh, that's gross. So that is a great story. And I think we can all relate to that in a certain way. One man's trash or one woman's trash is another woman's treasure. And I think that's one of the things to keep in mind here. All righty. We love being on the Working Genius podcast with you. The numbers are going way up. A lot of people are listening to this. We appreciate that. All you're doing to help other people find their geniuses. And so we will talk to you next time on the Working Genius podcast. God bless.